At 6:35 on a clear September morning in 1942, a B-17 Flying Fortress collided with the sea somewhere off the coast of the Pacific. 3 men survived the crash and clung to a tiny inflatable raft less than 3 meters across. The sky was endless, the water malignant, and the nearest land a hypothesis on the horizon. What followed was a 47-day odyssey that would test not only bodies but the human mind, revealing the precise psychological shifts that separate desperation from survival. The first hours after a crash are dominated by acute stress. Adrenaline sharpens senses, elevates heart rate, and narrows attention to immediate tasks: check wounds, secure flotation, ration supplies. For these airmen, initial decisions were life-saving. They stripped the wreck for available supplies, removed their boots to prevent blisters, and tied themselves to the raft so that exhaustion would not let them drift apart. In this phase, cognitive functions remain relatively intact. Decision-making is efficient because the brain is mobilized for crisis response. As the days wore on, the environment began to impose a different psychology. The relentless sun turned the raft into an oven, and dehydration set in. Sleep became fragmented and shallow, and with it came the first notable cognitive decline: impaired short-term memory and slowed reaction time. Small disagreements about rationing and future direction began to appear. What distinguishes survivors in this stage is not the absence of conflict, but the discipline to keep arguments instrumental focused on survival tasks rather than emotional venting. Rituals emerged, assigning watch rotations, preserving saliva by limiting speech, and conserving energy through long periods of motionless silence. These rituals are crucial because they create perceived control, countering learned helplessness, a psychological state that can extinguish effort when outcomes seem random. Hunger introduced another transformation. The brain's priorities shift when calories run low. It becomes harder to plan, to imagine future outcomes, and to sustain empathy. The men reported vivid food dreams and intrusive thoughts about meals they once took for granted. Yet paradoxically, starvation can also trigger a kind of tunnel focus that favors immediate problem-solving: catching rainwater, fashioning a spear, or using clothing to create shade. Cognitive narrowing here serves survival by conserving resources and concentrating attention on a few high-reward actions. External threats compounded internal strain. Sharks circled, attracted by blood and motion, forcing long stints of hypervigilance. Each strafing pass by an enemy fighter jet was a severe shock, suddenly reactivating the trauma response. These episodic surges of fear produce physiological spikes, surges of cortisol and adrenaline, that, when repeated without sufficient recovery, degrade decision-making and increase risk-taking. Yet the men adapted their routines to mitigate these risks, minimizing splashing, remaining low in the raft, and timing any movement for calmer seas or twilight hours. Throughout their ordeal, a quieter psychological evolution occurred: dissociation and compartmentalization. To survive the unthinkable, the men mentally bracketed memories of home and future-leaning plans. They recounted later that they often recited mundane details, town names, song lyrics, snippets of Bible verses, to maintain identity while keeping emotional pain at bay. This cognitive scaffolding preserved morale and provided a narrative continuity that prevented the disintegration of self. Resilience in this context was not heroic denial, it was pragmatic, adaptive cognition. It required flexible problem-solving, emotional regulation through ritual and routine, and an ability to switch between acute vigilance and energy-conserving stupor. On day 47, when rescuers finally spotted them, the men were reduced to skeletal figures but mentally intact enough to seize their chance at living. Their survival maps onto a sequence: mobilization, adaptation, narrowing of focus, compartmentalization, and finally, opportunistic engagement when rescue presented itself. Their story is less about an extraordinary body than an extraordinary mind that learned, through incremental adjustments, how to allocate attention, conserve resources, and preserve meaning under relentless extremes. The psychology of survival revealed in those 47 days shows a human capacity to transform terror into precise, repeated actions, small, deliberate choices that, strung together, amount to the miracle of continued life.